Hey guys and girls, welcome back to another beautiful video on this beautiful channel, this beautiful day. How you guys and girls doing? Hope you're doing great. Today we're going to talk about this beautiful thing called two-dimensional arrays. Now we talked about arrays in the last video, and there's a bunch more you can say about arrays and a bunch more ways that you can use them. And the ways we're talking about now are very basic and just for you to learn, but this isn't how you're going to be using arrays usually in the future, because we'll talk about something called dynamic memory in the future. But for now, I just want to show you the types of ways you can use arrays, at least the different techniques that you can use. So the last video was about one-dimensional arrays. So we had a regular array of maybe integers, my array, with like 10 spaces, right? Or 10 places to store data, 10 integers. Now, what if you want... Now, this would look like this, right? 10 spaces like this, just after each other. Maybe there's 23 here, 345 here, just small boxes after each other. So let's create a const int array size and say 5, because we'll use 5, all right? So array size. Now, if I had 5 things here, that would go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have a bunch of things in here, maybe like this. Now, what if we want something that looks more like this? So what if I do this 5, and then I just copy paste this like this? So something like this, right? And we just comment that out. So what if we want something like this? Like, is this 5? Yeah, 5 times 5. So you want to kind of have an array of arrays. So every space in this array has its own array in it. Alright, so this one maybe has a few numbers like this, something like that, while the other one has something else, and you can kind of access these by using rows and column numbers. So this first one would be row 0, column 0. The second one would be column 1, row 0. So that's kind of how it works. This would be column 2, row 0, right? This spot right here. And this spot would be column 3 or column 2, row 1. So that's kind of how that works. Now, to have a grid-like array, which could be really useful for things like games and whatever, you want to do this. So you want to have an array of arrays. So my 2D array. And you want to say array size. So that's like a regular array, but again, some size right here. So what this does, it makes an array of the same thing as this, just one row like this, like that, and then it makes that many arrays that you type in here. You can have more than that. You can have a bunch of arrays, 7 maybe, whatever, but in our case it's 5. So 5 spaces for 5 arrays. So each of these spaces will have their own array of 5 spaces like this. So that's what the second one decides. So now we have something looking like this, although they're empty. So what I want to do is I want to fill this with a bunch of numbers. And we're going to talk about random later on more in detail. So we're not going to use random numbers right now, but you could, for example, do that. But we will talk about that in another video. But let me just start off by filling it with zeros. So array size. So remember in the last video we went through the whole array using one for loop like this. So if I would write my array here, array.I equals 0, that wouldn't really cut it, because at position 0 there isn't just one element now, there's 5. So at position 0 there's another array of 5 more elements. So I have to make another for loop, and this is called a nested for loop. Nested for loop, and this is a 1D array. This is a 2D array, two-dimensional array. So this is a nested for loop. Now I'll take my thing and I'll put it in here. That sounds really bad and wrong, but still, I'll put it in the for loop, and I'll just explain all this as I go along. So you want to change these as well. Array size here. So the same thing, because there's each of these has 5 in it, right? So you want to use array size here again, which is 5. But yeah, so we have k instead. If you have the same thing, remember what we talked about scope, that won't work. It will crash because it'll say, oh, there's 2 i's here. You can't have multiple definitions like that. So we need to have different definitions. If this for loop, if I make another for loop out here, then it can have I, because this I will be gone by the time this ends. So here there is no more I, so I can create a new one. And that's the way that works. But in here, I is still alive, basically. So you have to use k. So size tk, array size, and k. So this is a nested for loop. Let me just see, like that. K. And let me see what is complaining. Size tk expression must have a pointer to object type. Sure, why not? There we go. My 2D array, sorry, my 2D array, I at k. So see, it was complaining because I was trying to access something that doesn't exist. I want to set all these to 0. So what's going to happen here? Now let me try to visualize this for you. So we'll start at k is 0 and I is 0, right? So I 0, k 0. That will be this first one here. We'll set that to 0. Now the next loop, this is gonna run 5 times for every one of this, that outer one. So the outer one runs once, and this runs 5 times, and then again once, 5 times, up until this is done. So the first one, if you can see that, visualize it, will be in this first column until this is done. So 0, 0 is this one. Then it will be 0, 1, which is this one. 0, 2, which is this one, all the way up until 0, 4, which is this one. Then, when this is done, the upper one will be done, outer one will be done, and iterate. So this will be 1 now, and then we'll restart this one. So 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, and so on. And then this is going to change to 2, 0, 2, 1, 2, 2, and so on, so on. So it will fill everything with zeros. So let me just go ahead and do that, and let me just copy paste this whole for loop, and we're going to print it out. So std cout. I got a comment from a really nice viewer that asked why we don't use using namespace, and I think I explained that before, but I'm sure if you're new and you're just watching this video, I don't use it because it's not a good habit to have later on in life, because it can cause big problems when you're linking and you have different namespaces and they all collide, and you'll have a bunch of problems. So don't use that if you can. In these tutorials, if you don't want to write std, you can use using namespace, as long as you don't get used to it too much. But just remember that. And the reason I write new line like this is because it's faster. I don't use std end line. It's a little slower, so it's just a good habit to have. Small things you can do. But yeah, there you go. So I'm going to print this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print all of these out like that in new line. And that should actually, if I just print all of these out and then a space afterwards, and then at the end I make a new line, that will actually give us this in another format. See, it will print all of these out in a row like this, and then it will go to the next row and the next row and the next row and the next row. So it would be horizontally instead, but you'll see. But if I just run this quickly, we should have a 2-dimensional array running nicely. See, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so let me just try to show you. Now, the way I explained it before is still correct, but now just try to think of these as horizontally instead of what I explained, which was vertical. So let me just show you this. In our case, it doesn't really matter. The data is just in there anyway, but you can visualize it like this, the way we're printing this out. So the way we're printing it out is, this is 0, 0. This is then 0, 1. And this is 0, 2. This is 0, 3. And this is 0, 4. And this is 1, 0, Now this isn't the data in them, this is the code they have, this is their index, this is 1 1 and so on and so on. So it's this way instead, and I can visualize that by actually saying my 2D array at position 0 is 20 or 10, whatever, just 10, and I run this, then you'll see a 10 in the upper left corner. If we say something at 4 4 is 10, what will that do? I want you to guess. So I want you to play around with this. Once you've done this, I want you to play around with this. That's the bottom right corner, right? 4 4 at the bottom. Now if I want the center, obviously there isn't a center really because it's 5. Actually the center is dumb, but whatever, let's do 0 1 and see what we get. So if I've done it correctly, yeah, 0 1 is to the right of 0 0, so 0 1. If I do 0 4, what you get is top right. And I want you to guess what the bottom left would be then before I do it. What is the bottom left? So if you've guessed it correctly, it's 4 0, right? Because that would be 4 down and on the 0 column. So the 4th row in the 0 column, or whatever you call it. So just play around with these numbers, see how that works. Of course you can make 3D arrays too, which is really probably, then you want to do R size, you want to do one more like this. You can keep going, but I think after 2D or 3D arrays it gets a little too complicated. I don't want to deal with that. I really don't like dealing with it, especially when you have dynamic memory, which we'll talk about. But yeah, this is a basic kind of introduction for you when it comes to 2D arrays, and you can use this a lot in games. I bet you'll see the use of these later on. If you have tiles, for example, a 2D grid, using a 2D array like this, and different grid values have different tiles maybe. Some do damage, some don't. Maybe your character is at a certain tile, and you can check if the character is on a trap or not by just using these indices, which we'll call them. So yeah, basically you can play around with this. Please try out some different combinations, try to make your own and just play around with them. It's really good to know and get good at this. But yeah, thanks for watching, best of luck, take care, and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, bye bye.